Hello and welcome to Ask the Expert, a daily series from 8:30 a.m. to 9 a.m. to help small businesses. Now, if you've got any questions, please post them in the comments or use the hashtag QBATE on Twitter. If you need any more advice, join the official Intuit QuickBooks SMB community group on Facebook. Accountants and business experts are on hand 24/7. Now, during the live session, we will also be running a poll, so please do engage with it and I'll reveal the results at the end. So today, what can I say? We as a small business community are at it again. We're in lockdown and it is the perfect opportunity, the silver lining, in fact, for us to work out how to restart, rebuild, and flourish during 2021. Now, I'm very conscious that many small businesses have been through a rough ride during 2020. And over that time, we've learned a fair few lessons along the way. First, let me share a little bit with you about who I am and I guess the experiences that I accumulated in particular over 2020 and some of the stuff that I'd like to talk about today. So I'm Carl Reeder. I serve as joint chairman of D&T. I serve as a brand ambassador for a number of corporates, helping them to communicate with a small business space. And I also am the author of Boss It, which was released in October 2020. Now, the manuscript for this book was actually completed on the 24th of February, a nightmare time to finish a book when you think of how much changed in the world since then. In fact, in my foreword, I was talking about all of the crazy stuff going on in the world, the wildfires in Australia, the fact that there was geopolitical disturbances, and the fact that certainly in the UK where I was, Storm Kiara was the worst weather known. And I happened to put a passing reference to this pandemic. In fact, it wasn't a pandemic at the time. This virus that was over in China, at the other end of the world, just as a passing example of some of the uncertainty that was out there at that point in time. So that was 24th of February. Fast forward to 24th of March. The publisher probably hadn't even picked up my manuscript by that point, and the world had turned on its head. We'd started getting a feeling for lockdowns. We'd certainly seen our friends and partners in Italy and other countries doing the same. We'd seen images of what was happening, and we'd realised by that point that for our businesses there would be some level of disruption, and we would need to adapt quickly. Now, I was fortunate enough to be able to write another chapter of my book at the post edit stage to talk about how businesses can pull through the coronavirus using the principles that I teach for small businesses who are just starting up. And I believe that that case applies equally today as it did back on the 24th of March, as it did in June or July when I wrote it, and October when I released the book. Because we are going through an uncertain time, and I've seen that through the thousands and thousands of business owners that I speak to, through my small business community, through my social media, through my business, which looks after a few thousand small businesses, and also engaging with business leaders, with the small business minister, and so on. I can see that the world has turned on its head, but I've also seen some amazing, amazing examples of businesses using this external influence, realizing that they can't control the external influence, but they can control their reaction to it and adapting to meet the new world. So we've seen businesses pivot to provide their services online. That's fairly standard. We've seen businesses providing their services in their car park or finding other ways of providing services outside. I've certainly seen that with martial arts schools and personal trainers. I've seen people convert from B2B models to B2C. I've seen people look at their existing business, which attracts footfall, converting it to a drive through farm shop. There's all kinds of inspirational stories of what people have done. And I think if I was to give one big lesson from this, it's first of all that you need to appreciate that you can only control what you can control, but you need to be mindful of the stuff that can happen outside of our spheres of influence. So if I was to rewind back to 2019, that seems like a long time ago now. But if I was to rewind back to 2019 and look at the kind of strategic thinking that I would be doing in my own business, I would typically lean towards a SWOT analysis. It's a very old school business model: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Strengths, I do a big long list of all the stuff we're good at. Weaknesses, I would do a big long list of the stuff that we need to improve on. Then opportunities and threats are divided between, the bits that are outside of our business, the stuff that we can't control, but we can have some direction in our business, being mindful of those issues. And I typically use a model called PESTLE, political, economical, societal, technological, legal, and environmental, to try and analyze these. But to look at the stuff that's outside of our control, outside of our influence, that actually will impact our business. Now, there's no way in 2019, but in my opportunities and threats, I would have put a pandemic. But boy, was that a threat, and also to some extent an opportunity for us. So, how did we handle it, and how did we pivot? Well, we were fortunate enough, but despite not having dealt with a pandemic before, heck, not even dealing with a week's worth of downtime, we have had to deal with server outages, we've had to deal with snow days, we've had to deal with times when the offices have been closed, and we had to flip very quickly from working within in an office, relying on our leased landline and our desktop computers and so on, to working offline and allowing our team to work anywhere they want to. You know, if they want to work in Starbucks or work on the kitchen side, we've been able to do that. So, by embracing cloud technology, that meant that part of the job was done for us. But we certainly didn't plan for a pandemic that would leave us working remotely for 10 months, and who knows how long that will be into the future. So rather than trying to control that outcome and trying to expend our efforts in stopping the pandemic in some way or stopping lockdown in some way, rather than trying to focus on that, instead we focused on how we can make ourselves resilient to more outside threats, because it's not beyond the realms of imagination that in our lifetime this might happen again. Or perhaps there might be another horrific scenario, such as war or anything else that could cause a massive, massive disruption in our business. So, what are the kind of things that we've looked at doing? We first of all virtualized what we do as much as we can. So bringing things online. We're all used to online meetings, and we're all suffering from the online fatigue. In fact, look, if this wasn't pandemic times, I would probably be on a stage somewhere in the world speaking to you right now, but that's not the case. We've looked at making sure that most of our systems within our business have been virtualized as much as possible, so that we can work online with as little reliance on our physical servers as possible, so that we don't rely on that physical chain in the connection of what we do. We've also tried to make sure that we've adapted our businesses to serve our clients better in this time as well, because they're going through unprecedented change. So things like building our coronavirus hubs and making sure that businesses are fully up to date with what's going on in a way that they can receive the information now. Sometimes it's for practical stuff. You can't post letters to a physical business address anymore. That just doesn't cut it. So it's been a really interesting time for us as we've gone through this adaptation, and we've steered our business into working in that way, as I'm sure we've all had. Now, I'm very conscious that you're going to have some questions to ask me. I can answer questions on pretty much anything and everything about small business. And if I don't know the answer, I'm not embarrassed to hold my hands up and say I don't know, but I will do my very best to help you with it. But primarily, what I'd like to do today is just give you that sense of optimism that this stuff is temporary. It's something that we can work around, we can pivot. And while some businesses have had to close their doors, others have found two more doors to open up. So now I'm going to dive into some of the questions. Now, we've had some of the questions come through from direct message here. If you pop them on the feed, that would be really useful for me, because then I'll be able to dive in and follow up with you if that's something that you'd like me to do. But Adrian, thank you so much for your Instagram DM. What advice or input from your own book, Boss It, would you like to give to your younger self, let's say 10 years ago? And just a question that I'm asked very often, in fact, perhaps the two most frequent questions are, what advice would you like to give to your younger self? And what was the best bit of advice you were ever given? And they're actually two very different answers to those. If I quickly cover off the one you haven't asked, the best bit of advice I was ever given was to build my network, was to keep details of everybody I've ever met and make sure that I stay in touch with them. And that served me well. But if I was to look back at my younger self, I would actually have some very different advice that I'd give myself, and nobody else gave me this advice. And that advice is, I would say that you should always question how you can go faster and make sure you go faster. Look, one of my big regrets, if I look back at my businesses, so yeah, I've been in the workplace for, Christ, I'm showing my age now, 24 years. I started at the age of 16, so nearly 24 years now. And I've been self-employed business owner since 2007. Um, but every step of the way, whether it was progressing in my employment, whether it was the takeover of a business that took far longer than it should have done, the scaling up of a business, which in hindsight looks like it's taken too long, um, I would say that I've not asked the right questions of myself to accelerate things. And there was a really good question in a book by a guy called Peter Thiel, which is, how can we do this 10 times faster? And I think that was the answer, or 100 times faster. It was along that sort of lines. Please don't quote me verbatim on that answer. But the question was, why should this take 6 years? Why can't it take 6 months? It's a really good question to challenge yourself about, why can't you put your foot down on the accelerator? Often we look to get caught up in a couple of different areas, Adrian. So the first one is that we try to overanalyze how to do what it is we're trying to do, rather than just trying to find the experts and go ahead with it. Now, the problem with trying to work out how to do it is, first of all, we don't know how to do it. And second of all, we don't know the red flags we should be looking out for. So I would say my best advice would be, put your foot down sooner, find the right people to steer you in the right direction, and let them drive it forwards. That's certainly something I wish that I've done, and it's something that I'm picking up on as a habit to go forwards. Another recent book that's just been released, is called Who Not How. And it's all about finding the right people rather than the right solution, and letting the people find the solution for you, and to work through the problems, and to find a way of driving it forwards. That would certainly be I guess, in line with my messaging of put your foot down so that you can't look back and have any regrets. Now, that's not to say that you need to drive forward with reckless abandon. That's not to say that you don't follow the process of dream, plan, do, review, which I cover in my book. That's not to say that you don't cover off all of the principles of scaling, such as making sure that you've got your financial model, your leadership model, your staffing model, and your growth model in place, underpinned by your vision and your values and all of that stuff. Look, that's all covered here. You need to make sure that you go through all of this stuff, but there's no reason why you can't do it at pace. Now, Nyla, thank you so much for the message on Twitter. Nyla has asked, as we go into another lockdown, I want to keep my team in the right spirits, and I'm planning to do daily calls to check in on how they're doing. Any tips or advice on what else I could do to keep them motivated? Now, this again is a really interesting one, because this is something that I've actually learned on the job. And I've seen what some businesses have done, what other businesses have done. I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. And certainly in the early days of remote working, it was really necessary to go into intensive care. So if we cast our minds back to March when we first went into lockdown, look, this shouldn't be an unknown to us now. We've been there, we've seen it, we've done it. We know we kind of know the routine now. But in March we didn't. We didn't know quite what was going to happen. We didn't know, whether we could go to, this supermarket or that supermarket if one of them was half a mile further away than the other. There was a lot of big uncertainties about what we could do personally, and our team members were going through that at that point as well. So in the first lockdown, I was a big advocate of treating team members as if they had just joined for business, so almost going through another induction. So more than daily, in fact, almost hourly check-ins, just really making sure they're engaged, they're on track, trying to find as many ways to virtualize the management experience as possible. Um, Over that time, certainly what I've observed is that different people respond to different management methods in different ways. And we're not so much in a change management process now. This actually is business as normal to a lot of us. So I think that what we need to do is we need to try and make sure that we keep the human connection, but tailored to each and every individual staff member. And that in fact is trickier than treating everyone as a new staff member because we can't just take a broad brush approach. We need to find out what motivates them rather than presume what would motivate us. Now, some of the exercises and things that I've seen of other businesses that have worked really well. Virtual team events, I think, are great. You know, you can look at virtual pizza lunches, you can look at virtual parties, and so on. You are allowed to run Christmas parties or any seasonal parties as if it was physical, but you can run them virtually. Also, just as a a side comment, I guess they don't need to be Christmas, but it's just an annual holiday allowance as far as the tax man's concerned. So you can do all kinds of events and you can treat your team in that way. I think it's really important to look out for your team. If you've got the budget, you can look at investing in things such as mental health fitness courses. You could possibly even look at paying for counselling services and so on to help keep the team buoyant. But really, just make sure that your team know you're there for them and help them understand that it is okay to switch off. One of the personal tricks that I used, certainly over the last few months, was to go through a virtual commute. So I would go out of the house, I'd jump in my car, and just drop off my little ones to school and nursery, come back, and it put me in the mindset of being at work. I would keep my shoes on while working, and it just helped separate out the day. Now, anything you can do to help your team members have some separation from home life and personal life, I think would be really valuable for them because if there's one challenge that can come out of this, it will be the always on culture. So that's the kind of stuff I'd be looking at. But look, I think the underlying message is it's not so much of a change as we might perceive because we are all fairly used to lockdowns now and it's not entirely unexpected. But now it's a case of keeping people buoyant. And unfortunately, we need to do that based on what keeps them buoyant rather than what keeps us buoyant. So the next question, Rachel from Facebook Messenger. Rachel, thank you so much for messaging in. Rachel's asked, I've been firefighting in my business almost daily for the last few months and just about managing to stay afloat. I want to take a good hard look and restart almost from scratch. However, it's difficult to detach from some of the ideals and ways that have been integral to building my business. How should I go about this? Any tips, please? So it's really tough, Rachel, to go into specifics on this. And I'm more than happy. In fact, with all of you, reach out to me on @CarlReader or all the social platforms, and I'll try and help as much as I can. I really do want to support you guys through this. It's hard without specifics of your business to advise too much. However, what I would say is what worked in 2019 possibly didn't work in 2020, almost certainly won't work in 2021 going forwards, even if we go back to normal. Because as a society, we've gone through a huge paradigm shift and we've changed the way that we do things, we've changed the way that we consume, the way that we entertain ourselves, and so on. And it's going to take a while to shake that off. I'm just thinking about, when we get back to normal and doing events and I'm back on stage. Now, I used to always come down with flu in the early part of the year after a few big conferences that I'd do, shaking people's hands. Will I be shaking people's hands in the future? I don't know because we've gone through such a dramatic shift personally, but we've changed the way we interact. Will we be going to big scale events? Yeah, I hope so, but I don't know. So we need to look at detaching ourselves as much as possible from what's happened previously and instead looking at what we can do and what the pillars of our business should be going forwards. So, how do we do this? We need to approach it as a new start. We need to focus, without wanting to sound like a broken record, on the dream plan do review model. We need to look at our vision, making sure that it's big enough to keep us engaged, but that it's also fit for purpose for the modern age. We need to plan. We need to work out what are our steps to do it. We need to take action. We need to review it. But we need to do that process as if it is a new start. And a great method to adopt for this is it's actually a financial tool called zero-based budgeting, but some finance departments use. And that is, we need to detach ourselves from our preconceived ideas, our preconceived objections, and start with a blank canvas. Now, I've used this for my strategic thinking for a number of years, and I hate to say it, but I used to do this in Paris. I mean, what better place than Paris? I would go, I would have a steak and chips, I would have a bottle of red. I'd never finish the bottle because I'd be too excited with all the ideas going through my mind. But certainly a glass or two helps you along the way, and a notebook. That's all I would have. And I would start daydreaming whilst eating and drinking and people watching and just allowing the world to go round me. And I would just brain dump. The reason why it needs to be Paris was because A, it's a beautiful city, B, there's no risk of, or very little risk of bumping into people I know, and C, yeah, it's quite an inspirational place. I don't get distracted by conversations because I can't speak French and so on. So I would just brainstorm. I would do pages of notes, and then I would wander around aimlessly around the city until my evening or until my flight home, and that would allow the ideas to permeate and start to come up. Now we can't do that under lockdown conditions, but we can try to replicate that as much as possible. So I would suggest that this activity is not within your normal place of work, whether that's the kitchen table or the spare bedroom. However you're working during lockdown, I would try to find a different environment to do it. Maybe during our permitted exercise time. I would suggest that you try to detach yourself from any forms of communication as well. I think one of the reasons that overseas works for me is not being distracted by other people's conversations and hearing things and so on. So trying to find a place that works for you, Rachel, to really allow that freedom of thinking. Once you've got that, you can then go through the dream plan do review model that I'll go through in the book, and it will help you build a business version too. You might find you end up having two businesses running side by side. Sigmund from Twitter DM, good morning. What is the change of mindset required for a business owner to develop into a business leader? Now, I've got a very quick answer to that, and it actually came about from a chance meeting that I had with Brad Smith, who is, funnily enough, the executive chairman of Intuit, our very kind hosts for today. Now, Brad is a very, very successful executive. I met him out in Silicon Valley when I was speaking, and I actually asked him, at the time he was CEO of Intuit, I asked him, "You've got such a wonderful culture in your organization. What is your advice about leadership?" And he said to me that leadership is really simple: set the path and get out the way. And it was so simple, but so true. The problem is that when we're a business owner, we love, we roll our sleeves up and we get stuck in and we do it. But to be a business leader, you've got to find and develop better people around you. Set the vision, remove any hurdles, get out the way. And that advice from him has stuck with me. I actually quoted it in my book as well, and it's advice that I'm delighted to pass on to the rest of you. Oscar from Facebook Messenger. Um, so Oscar finally has his face mask order ready to ship in the UK. He's worried that prices have dropped to a point where it's no longer profitable to take the order. I'm deciding whether to cancel the order and lose my deposit or take the container. What should my SWOT analysis look like? What should I be looking out for? Okay, Oscar. Oscar. Where do I start? Forget your SWOT analysis. In the politest way, there is a challenge in businesses that fads are great in the early days, but they don't last. They don't stick around. Um, I've seen so many businesses come and go due to temporary fads. At the moment, I have to say the volume of purchases for face masks seem to be a temporary fad. Will we change our culture to be more like the Far East, where we wear face masks every time we feel a bit unwell? I don't know. That is a big unknown, and we can't answer that. But it's pretty uncertain, I would say, at this stage, that face masks are going to be here for the long term. And what do I mean by the long term? By anything more than the year or two of whatever it is we're going through. So the fact that you already feel it's unprofitable, I would cut losses and run as quickly as I can, and find something that's less attached to a fad. Look, let me share with you some of the fads that um, I've seen along the way. Energy performance certificates, um, homeowner surveys, fish spas where you go in and have your feet, fish pedicures where they bite away at your dead skin. There are many peaks and troughs in the world, and it's something that the business landscape goes through year after year. They come and go. Unfortunately, what we need to do when we're considering a business is we need to look at the longevity of that business. And face masks, I don't believe, have a particular longevity there. They are a commodity. They can be produced at mass. Companies like ASOS are actually producing them from their offcuts. They can dispatch far cheaper than you. They can produce far cheaper than you. So instead, what I would be doing, Oscar, I'd be looking at redirecting and looking at how you can serve the markets that are growing, but are growing longer term. The elder generation, despite the health crisis, we have a higher skew towards our elder generation than ever before. So that would be one of the areas that I'd be looking at. But look at business opportunities um, that are long term with longevity rather than adopting short term waves. Because unfortunately, Oscar, I think if you're finding it's no longer profitable now, it certainly won't be profitable down the line. And rather than wasting time doing a SWOT analysis on an unprofitable business, I would work out a new idea and do SWOT analysis on that. Mohammed, Instagram DM. Should I furlough all my parental employees? Productivity is fine right now, but I'm looking to stay ahead of the curve and start finding cover early if there are going to be problems later on down the line. Mohammed, I can't answer that one, unfortunately. I don't know legally if you are allowed to selectively pick and choose who you furlough. I know that some unions have stated you can, but that's clearly something you need to take legal advice on. Um, I would be hesitant to do that right now personally. Um, and Showcat from Facebook Live, what advice would you give a new employee who has just started working from home? Well, that one is going to be a very simple answer. Buy my book, Boss It. It's a very cheap book on Amazon, and it's far cheaper than paying for an expert to tell you it all. And it will walk you through the process. Now, I'm conscious we've had a few other questions, but I'm afraid I've not been able to answer through both the lives and messages. So I do apologize. But we are up against the clock here. If you want to find out more, you can always contact me. But look, the poll results are in. We asked you, are you optimistic about your business growth in 2021? 75% of you said yes, 25% of you said no. So I'm really glad that despite the doom and gloom that's out there, we've got some level of optimism. Remember, we can only control what we can control. There's no point trying to control the bigger picture, trying to change the world, trying to influence the pandemic, unless we truly can do that. Instead, we need to focus on our business and make sure that we are best placed to tackle this going forwards. Now, I'd like to thank you all for tuning in this morning. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you, and I hope that you've had some value from this. If you want to get in contact with me, please feel free to give me a follow, send me a DM. I'm on all social media platforms at Cole Reader. I'm fairly easy to find. Coming up on Ask the Expert tomorrow is my good friend Eriona, who's the managing director of Majors Accounts. Now, Eriona is a superstar, so I guarantee you that one will be worth tuning into. You can get advice on the latest updates about government grants, about loans, the importance of digitizing your business. Tune in for it. Same time, 8:30 a.m. tomorrow morning. And just as a reminder, if you need any more advice, join the official Intuit QuickBooks SMB community group on Facebook. Accountants and business experts are on hand 24/7. It's been great answering your questions this morning. Have a fantastic day.